You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch movies and TV about places that probably aren't purgatory.
Probably.
But
could be.
But can you blame me for thinking it might be?
Purgatory adjacent.
Can you blame me for thinking it might be? We watched From.
We did. We're only watching one word TV shows from now on.
Impossible to Google TV shows.
Impossible to Google.
It's my turn to have been the one to have almost said the other person's name. I did almost say, hi, I'm Jodie. No, I'm not.
Oh,
that's you.
That's me. I'm Jodie.
I'm Andrea.
Yeah. And we watched From, and in our shared document, we have a nice little run going, and it's something like From Evil Silo, or Silo Evil from Lost, or
from the dark lost silo of evil.
Lost Evil Silo. Yeah.
Good Lord. What is with people?
I don't know. It's really,
here's one thing.
Yeah.
Just as a little behind the scenes secret is I may be working on naming a new podcast. I don't even think I've mentioned this to you, Jodie.
No, you haven't.
And naming things right now, it's even worse for podcasts because there are so many, but every good name has been taken.
Yes. And
so maybe that's part of it.
I mean, but that's literally the job.
Yeah.
You're getting paid by, not you, but these people are getting paid by a major or minor network.
I believe this was an Epix show before
it was originally
it
an
moved to MGM.
Epix show, yes.
Quibi, long form Quibi.
Yeah. So maybe it's just that,
this originally aired on CISO TV.
Yeah. So they didn't get paid enough to come up with more than a one-word title.
Maybe they charged by the letter, whoever named it.
Well, it's all in capital letters, so maybe that's like, but that's hard to Google.
It's so hard to Google.
Yeah.
It's especially hard to Google stuff about it, because I can Google From TV series, fine. Yes. But then we just spent a few minutes, I was just trying to find out anything about the special effects on this show. Yeah. And it's a struggle.
Well, because you end up typing From special effects, and that doesn't mean anything.
And then I get like the history of special effects from, Titanic to, because we all know the first movie that used special effects was Titanic.
Right.
I don't know why that was the first movie I thought of. Because it's always the first movie I think of.
Yes.
Speaking of Leonardo DiCaprio, who was in William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet.
I followed you immediately, and I'm very proud of myself.
We've been making this podcast together
for too long. I know. Well, and the ADHD works in similar ways, I think, because, yes, Romeo and Juliet, Mercutio, Harold Perrineau.
That's right. One of the all-time greats.
Yes.
I do really like Harold Perrineau.
I love him. I do keep expecting him to yell Walt just because he's so long-suffering in both shows.
I know.
It's just like, we'll talk about the connections to Lost because they are many.
Oh, yeah.
Many, including the people that made both of them.
Show, yeah.
Yeah. But I really think that the powers that be that were involved in both TV shows just love watching him suffer specifically. Because he just, as we talked about last week, I've seen, I think the first season. I've definitely seen the whole first season. I don't remember if I got into the second season or not. But the one thing that is consistent, that is no spoiler, is that he continues to just be long-suffering, responsible for the world, tortured guy.
Perfect. He's got a face for it. I think the Michael Walt storyline, I know people got frustrated by it by the end, and I was sort of one of them, because he just spends a lot of Lost
yelling Walt.
So yelling Walt, and so much so that I always want to call him Walt.
Yeah.
The way that Pokemon say their own name all the time, I always have to remind myself his name is actually Michael. And so I sort of do get that frustration, but I think he's great, and there's he's lovely here.
This cast is a lot of people I wasn't super familiar with other than him.
Yeah.
But there is one person that connects to something we've talked about.
Are you talking about Billy Conrad?
I'm talking about
Jen's New York boyfriend?
I'm talking about Jen's New York boyfriend. for people that didn't watch from the Jim Matthews, who is played by, is it Ian?
I think it's just Ian.
Ian? Okay. Spelled differently. Bailey.
It's one of those Irish names where you just kind of have to, but
it's
I'm pretty
pronounced
sure
like
that
Siobhan or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, he plays one of the main characters, Jim Matthews, and he was in a couple episodes of Dawson's Creek.
Season 1, a couple of real pivotal early episodes when you're figuring out who Jen really is and watching Dawson be a drip.
Yeah.
He's got like a cool red convertible. And then he married this beautiful lady and they had 2 to 3 children together.
Yes, 2 to 3. Yeah, he's another one. I don't know. We'll get into the cast and my feelings about them from this first episode specifically, but maybe we should start just by kind of giving a little rundown. This premiered in February of 2022. They filmed in the middle of COVID up in Nova Scotia. And I was watching an interview with the cast, and it was like, it took them a while to be able to get into Nova Scotia, like because of all the like COVID restrictions. And then once they got there, they actually couldn't leave. And so it was a little bit of like a little bit of a From situation. They were just stuck in Nova Scotia until the filming was done.
What a way to get into the headspace of these people, huh?
Yeah, seriously.
That rules. I mean, I'm sorry for them, but that's kind of cool.
There's been 3 seasons so far, 10 episodes per season. There is one more season coming for sure. It's been renewed for season 4, but that season's not going to be, it's not filming yet, and the season isn't going to be released until at least like early 2026. So people are kind of annoyed about that.
It's funny because I'm so used to now my show's taking forever that I was thinking, wow, 2022 it premiered and we already have 3 seasons.
I know.
Like kind of count your blessings that now you have to wait a little longer than usual because
not everything is Severance.
I was going to say
7 years
comes back in 5 days and how long ago was season 1? When did season 1 air? Was it 2019?
No.
Is that crazy?
That's
I have
not
no sense of time.
No, that is
in my
not
head,
true.
It's 2019 though.
Yeah, no, it is not quite that long ago. 2022. So it has been 3 years.
You're right. Yeah.
Early 2022.
From knocked out 3 seasons.
When Severance did 1. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so it will be back, but not for quite a while.
What was it, 2015, season 1?
Work faster. Come on, Ben Stiller.
I just hope season 2.
What else are you doing?
Well, you know what else Ben Stiller's doing right now?
What?
Is the Severance Rewatch podcast, because all these fucking celebrities.
Everybody needs a podcast.
Can't just let people like us.
I know.
Who are just looking to have a little joy in our lives.
You got to comment on your own shit? Come on. Let other people do it.
That's my job and
you
your
made
job.
it. Yeah. You made it. We talk about it. This is like the natural order of things. Stop fucking it up.
Or unless, and also, Ben Stiller, Adam Scott come on our podcast, I guess.
Sure.
Then we love what you're doing.
Yeah.
So happy for you.
Exactly.
Continued success.
Yeah. God bless.
Yeah. Should we talk about From?
Sure. It's been called the spiritual successor to Lost.
One more thing. Hang tight. We're going to save it for the end, but Jodie and I have to talk about Evil.
Oh, yes. That was assumed, I think. So this has been called the spiritual successor to Lost because a lot of the same people that were involved in Lost are involved here. We've got Jack Bender, Jeff Pinkner, who also worked on Alias and Fringe, which is something I think we briefly talked about, maybe?
Yeah, when we do the Month of Pacey shows that we're definitely going to do.
Right.
We'll
That's why we talked about it, of course. And yeah, it filmed in Nova Scotia.
But to be clear, set, I think, somewhere in New England-ish?
So it's hard to say. It's set in a very woodsy green place. Like it to me reads as Vermont or Canada. Like it's very northern.
Vermont was my feeling. I don't know if winter comes to this town. I don't know how seasons work. I know this is maybe the show I knew least about going into.
Yeah.
And so I haven't seen anything from later seasons to know if we get later seasons. But to me, it felt like, especially because they say that I think it's Toby and Jade.
Yes,
they say are from Boston.
Yeah,
and
their plates are New York plates, and they said there's a comment like, "Oh, weren't Sarah and Nathan from New York, and they're like, no, they're from Boston.
Boston, right.
So yeah,
that's right.
There's some New England references in there for sure. And there's comments on like the places. The RV has Arizona plates.
And it seems like they're from far away.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the feeling I got there. And especially because they're in an RV. They're traveling a distance.
Right. Yeah. No, it definitely implied that it's like in that Northern America / Canadian border. But, you know, filming in Nova Scotia is kind of right there.
Right.
So, but it does have that very like isolated, woodsy, like as someone who just spent some time in Northern Vermont, like I do get that sort of like suddenly you have no service and nothing but trees around you. And you're like,
right.
how does this exist in?
Yeah. I think I've mentioned lived is not quite the right word, but I spent a lot of time on the border of New Hampshire and Vermont, on what to me is a literal mountain. But again, I'm from Jersey, but where I had zero cell reception and no landline. Like if something had happened,
yeah,
who knows?
Yeah. So I mean, when I was in Vermont this summer, I was in Johnson, Vermont for a month, and there was not a lot of cell service around there either. You had to be near Wi-Fi to really get a good signal. And so, you know, this first episode, it was interesting to rewatch knowing that I got frustrated with this, because I do remember being, and I don't want to be a downer about this, because again, the reason I wanted to revisit this is because I wanted to see specifically for me, if it was something I was willing to give another shot to, like, because the second and third season, I looked at the Rotten Tomato scores. The first season got like a 96%.
Oh, wow.
The second got a 92 and the third got 100%.
Whoa. Jodie,
so like,
hold on.
I know. So I was like, maybe I just needed to have more patience. But the problem about me is that I've never been able to have more patience. and so I still don't know if I'm going to be able to go back. Honestly, if this was all on Netflix for free, I would probably leave it on and like get through season 1 without thinking too much about it, get into seasons 2 and 3 and see how I feel. But because it's on a service that I would have to either re-up and pay for or like watch everything in a 7-day free trial, like right. I don't know if I'm going to
And I'll say I could see this being a kind of show that
it's a mystery box show, which you love.
Which, again, I love, but I couldn't tell while watching it. I think this pilot is great. I'll say that flat out. I think
I do too. That's
so watchable. Yeah. I liked it so much. We'll get into why.
Yeah.
But as I was watching it, I was like, would this become a show? I could see this becoming the kind of show where if there isn't enough pulling me along, I get frustrated and it's a little bit of the silo of it all to me where like I could see myself just watching to get to the end because I wanted to know. And I was like, I haven't done this yet because I knew we were recording today, but I was like, there's a chance I just go read
the Wikipedia
on this show. And then I haven't made that call for sure yet.
Yeah. I was looking on Reddit, trying to not get spoiled, but also to see what people were saying about season 3, to see if, like, because for me, I think I said this last week, the thing that frustrated me about this show was I wanted some answers. I didn't want all the answers. I know that it's an ongoing thing. They have a multi-season plan. It's like Yellowjackets, right? Like you want things to be answered slowly along the way at a pace that is satisfying, but not ruining the whole thing, right? And for me, the pace of answers here was 0 for what I watched. So I went on Reddit, and literally this was posted yesterday or the day before. It was posted 3 hours before I read it. And someone says, does anyone have any idea what's going on? Hey there, everyone. Uh-oh. Hey there, everyone. Just discovered the show. We finished all 3 seasons. Has anyone found a decent theory on what exactly is going on in this show? My curiosity is through the roof and just want an answer or 2. Thank you all.
Okay. Do you want to know what fear was just planted in my heart?
What's that?
The deep fear
is it Lost related?
Yes, because it's Jack Bender being like, oh, you fuckers didn't like my answers? Well, here's a show where you get none. You didn't like it when we gave you answers.
But I do, so every bit of promo and press that I have engaged with around this show has been like so blunt about the fact they're not doing Lost, that they started with every single answer, that they didn't like even start filming season 1 until they knew the end. Like when I just watched an interview with Jack Bender where he talked about the creator of the show, who is Jack or John, they all have the same name, John Griffin. How when he met with John Griffin to talk about maybe being involved in the show.
That is the exact same name as Jack Bender. Like, you're right.
Yeah, it's all the same. And then Jeff Pinker. It's, come on. But when Jack Bender met with John Griffin to talk about possibly being involved in the show, he said that John Griffin took on the role of almost like a history professor and explained from start to finish the entire arc of the show.
Okay.
And everything that was going to kind of come together at the end. So it literally, they've said it in interviews that like they're not going to make the mistake that Lost made. Like, it's very blunt about that. So, but the question is, like, they don't know how many seasons they're going to get. So they have a full story that they have to tell. But it's like, okay, they just found out they were getting a 4th season. So what the fuck were they going to do if they ended at 3?
Yeah.
You know?
So TV's so stressful.
I know, but it's all there. They have all of the answers. One thing that I thought was really funny, though, is none of the cast have any fucking clue what's happening.
Beautiful. Incredible.
I just watched a cast interview from like right before the 3rd season aired. And the interviewer was like, you know, so how much do you know about what's going to happen to your characters? And every single one of them was like, they'll tell us nothing.
Wow.
Nothing. Like, we just go into it. Like, if there's part of the backstory that they need to know, like there's a reveal later in season 1 about the sheriff Boyd that is like part of his backstory, but we don't know yet. That he'll know. But like what's actually happening in the town, they will not tell anyone involved.
Incredible.
None of the cast. They're just like bumbling through it.
Which is, I guess, for a show like this, you want your characters to be confused and not know what's happening. And it's probably much easier to act that way when you actually don't know what's happening.
Yeah. But they say that this has had a full arc with full answers from before they first stepped foot onto the set to film season 1.
All right. Well, that kind of makes me want to. We'll see. I've got time, so maybe I'll hold off on reading.
Well,
the
you got to get
Wikipedia.
through Evil first.
Oh, I'll be done soon.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, so they have said that it is 100% answered at the end.
Okay.
But that's what I'm saying is like that. Maybe for me, it's the pacing then. Because, okay, I read that Reddit question. I didn't get to read the response. There's one response to that thread as of yesterday. They said, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happening. I got stunned every time I watched. But you can scroll down, search on this sub, information the last 3 months still relevant, the rest become outdate. So people who watch this show extremely closely have no fucking clue what's happening. Right. There's theories, but it's like, you know, the theories revolve around time travel and, you know, of course. It's so funny. Like, I get why these shows were then grouped together when people were like, what else can I watch after Yellowjackets? It's like, you know, we talked about how like Evil and was recommended Dark again, which I mentioned. There's a cave and you go through it and you go to 33 years before or after. Right. Sorry to ruin it, but it comes out in like the first season. And so all of this is like so circling around the same ideas, just approaching it from slightly different ways or in different countries.
Yeah.
And I think when we get to the end and we talk about Evil, I think it's pretty clear to me why that worked for me and this didn't. And a lot of that is structure. And a lot of that is like the philosophy of what to reveal and what not to reveal.
Right.
You know? Should we kind of talk through the pilot? Because I agree with you. Yeah. This is a really good pilot. Like, that's, I think, why I was so frustrated. Because I was like, this setting up so many interesting questions. It's got such a specific vibe and a sense of place that I really love.
And there's a version of the show where the pilot is this, except you never see person, creature, whatever.
Yeah.
And they save the gore for 5 episodes in. You don't know if there's an actual threat or if it's like I'm sure I haven't done a ton of reading about the show, like I said, because it's hard to find.
Yeah.
But like I'll bet Shirley Jackson references, comparisons abound, and like is the talisman really protective from something? Is it just their internal fears? Blah blah blah. But no.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like the first episode, the pilot makes you feel like, oh, this is going to set things up and it's going to give you some answers and it's going to progress forward at like a really like fun and interesting clip. And I did not find that after the fact. Like the pilot set me up to expect something that I didn't find panned out. But again, maybe I'm just an impatient person from Bergen County who wants answers right now.
Simple folk down here in South Jersey. We're not in such a rush.
You're willing to just sit by the fire and hear a yarn told while you chew on some straw. And
hang out on the porch.
Drink your cranberry juice.
Sunset.
Yeah.
Cranberry juice. Yeah.
That's what I imagine your childhood was.
You got it.
Playing in rusted out cars and drinking cranberry juice.
I mean, yeah.
And befriending raccoons.
God, I'd love to be offended right now, but that is what it was.
You can't be.
No,
you can't be.
Literally it.
Yeah. Okay. So the cast we talked about, there's like a lot of people I wasn't familiar with. To me, a couple of standouts, at least in this first episode, were Ricky, Hay as Kenny Lou, the deputy. I love him.
What a sweetie.
And like, he has a very expressive face. You really feel for him. You feel like he's a good guy. Like one of the things I found hard about this show, I think, was finding people to root for. Like, because Boyd, the sheriff, I can imagine people rooting for him, but I find him a little bit long suffering. I think like since the last time I engaged with him was in Lost and he was always suffering there, now he's always suffering here, I'm a little bit like, oh God.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah. But Kenny, I do feel like he's easy to root for, you know? And you feel that from the very first episode. And his like quote unquote love interest, the girl you can tell he has a huge crush on, Christy, the doctor. She's very easy to root for as well.
Yeah. I found we don't get a ton about a lot of these people in the first episode, though.
Yeah.
Maybe actually now I'm trying to decide. Yeah. I mean, we know nothing about anybody's backstory really at this point. So it's hard to say like who I was immediately rooting for and who I really like to start. But Kenny is an obvious one, though we do get to see him with his dad, which is so sweet and sad.
Well, that's, you know what, not to interrupt, but say we don't get a lot of backstory, but we get their relationships to each other.
Yeah.
Like we see them interact in really revealing ways about their character. I think maybe that's what you're reacting to.
Yeah. Okay. So because a lot of what I want to say has to do with things that happen.
Okay.
So maybe let's start with
the sheriff ringing the bell.
Yeah, this feels, I said Shirley Jackson, Boyd coming through, sheriff ringing that bell, sending everybody home.
Yes.
As someone who's only seen this first episode, it's like weirdly, immediately foreboding, of course, because why is everybody going home before sunset? But it's also the town itself feels there's a vibe that is difficult to pin down for me because it's also a little wholesome. Like people, it's not like these people aren't living lives. They're hanging out at a diner. Kids are playing on their swings.
Right.
It's just
girls have bikes. There's people like sitting on a porch with guitar. Like, it feels like small town life, but like the underside of it or something. Like small town life, but haunted.
Right. And I noticed I commented on it at first thinking it was a screw up for about 3 seconds. People at the diner leave. There's no check. They don't pay. But it's like, well, yeah, what's money in this town?
Yeah.
But it's cute that they keep the diner going.
Yeah. Sarah running the diner.
He's sending everybody home. We see our first talisman or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, we see a couple of them here, right? Like Sarah's closing up the diner. And they're all like touching it as they like check to make sure.
It feels to me like they're flipping an open sign to closed.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we get sheriff walking, Sarah in the diner, shooing people out. The jukebox comes on. It's sunset. there's like a upside down abandoned car in the pool. Like it's clearly a town that looks abandoned, but people still live there.
Yeah. And it's hard to say. It's really cool. It's hard to say how long this town has looked like this.
Yeah.
Because you, as a road trip person, have come upon towns
for sure.
In 2020, maybe not 2020, I picked a bad year, in 2018 or 2024 that look like this.
Yes.
Maybe not to this degree with the flipped over car and all of the flat tires, but of being like,
I'm thinking specifically about like northern western Virginia, not West Virginia, but like
I was going to say like central PA, which is pretty close to northwest Virginia.
Yeah. Like there was a period where I was driving back up from the south through there. I lost complete cell reception.
Yep.
Didn't have a paper map in the car. Thought I was going to end up trapped in a town, you know, surrounded by scary monsters.
One time while my low fuel light was on, I will never forget driving through a town that looked just like that.
Yeah.
Low fuel light and being like, it's over for me. What do I do? Middle of the night?
Yeah.
So what I think that works really well here, because we don't know how long this town has had this issue. We don't know how long, again, something else we can get into, maybe actually after this is over and we get to our questions, but like how long these people have been in this town. It's all really hazy.
But we do immediately know that this isn't like a community that was born there.
Right.
Because we find out immediately that they've all come from somewhere. They've all come from another place.
I think we have a guess where the original people are, but it seems like, and maybe this is, again, I haven't met everybody in town or anything, but it does feel like there is no one who has been here since whatever the before times were. Right. I know. I'm trying to remember if that's coming, but it doesn't matter. I wonder if we'll find somebody who's 90 years old who they keep like somewhere safe because they're like the keeper of the town's history or something.
Yeah, it's like they make it very clear in the beginning, like, oh, they came from Boston. Those people came from New York. Like, this is not where anybody started.
Right.
And when we get to the funeral and we see the new family come through, we realize like there's this comment about like, oh, remember what it was like for you.
Right. He's talking to the whole town when he says that.
Yeah. But as we'll go back to that. But like, as he's walking through the town, then we see a very ominous child on a swing with a teddy bear. It's like, yep, that kid's in trouble.
It's this kind of show.
Yeah. You see a kid alone and that's not good news.
And it always feels like this is just the opening scene, but it's all throughout. It feels like you're on the verge of evening storm all the time. It's got that like yellow sky, dusty, and the wind is always sort of kicking up, but never like in a full So
the mom calls her in. The sheriff is like, he's clearly like got stern dad vibes. You know, he's like, listen to your mom, go inside, you know. So then we meet Kenny and his father at what looks like some sort of makeshift retirement home playing chess.
Literally everything is makeshift in this town. Yes. It's kind of impressive, actually.
Yeah. But it's because it's sunset, Mr. Lou's got to go to the basement now, which, again, it's just ominous. It's like you got a kid on a swing, you know, guy with clearly some sort of mental issues, dementia, maybe has to go into the basement and is unhappy about it.
Yeah. And I guess it's probably because we don't want him traveling out at night.
Yes.
But I like the idea that maybe Kenny's dad turns into some sort of monster in the evening.
He's a werewolf.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, he's just got to go downstairs.
Yeah.
But we get a little nice moment where you see that the nurses that are there to care for him are both really sweet. One in particular clearly has like a soft spot for him and is talks to him very sweetly.
Yeah.
And this is where we kind of get the sense that Kenny has like a crush on this EMT nurse medic person.
Well, I was just going to say she's wearing her like EMT shirt open over her regular clothes in the same way that the person who is the town like priest is wearing jeans.
Yes.
The same way, like everything. In a weird way, it reminded me of the kids getting ready in we can be heroes, where it's like if you put the costume on,
right? Yeah.
It's not perfect,
right.
but it helps you fall into the role.
Yeah.
Because none of these people, I get the impression, like, I don't know that maybe Boyd does have some law enforcement, like a background in law enforcement, and that's how he becomes deputy or sheriff.
I think there's a non-spoilery reveal later that he was in the military.
Okay. So yeah, but that kind of thing where it's like, we're going to find the best version of what
closest,
we need. Yeah.
Yeah, because I got the impression that, this is not a doctor. This was someone who actually was like an EMT and is the best that they've got, their best option. But they go out, Kenny and Christy, her name is, go outside to start getting ready for them to go home as well. And he says that she has such a nice way with him. They have like a little awkward conversation. Mm-hmm. And then it's like time for him to try to get home. She goes inside and also, has to handle the rock.
Right.
Put the, turn the rock sign. let the creepy things know.
Should we be putting pins in connections to shows like Yellowjackets? Because I love
they're so
the mysterious
obvious
symbol.
Yeah. It's like the symbols, there's so many connections between Lost, between all of these other shows. Mm-hmm. And then he goes out in the street and joins the sheriff. We realize he's the deputy. He looks like a teenager. Like he's just got a young face. Mm-hmm. And so it's sweet because you have this like, sort of grizzled, tough sheriff who's clearly seen some bad shit. Mm-hmm. And this like sweet young deputy that's just trying to do his best. It's like a nice dynamic. Yeah.
And I'll bet it's helpful for him to have a sort of father figure while his own father is sort of withering. So I imagine that will play a role.
Yeah. And, we find out in this same episode that Boyd does have a son he's somewhat estranged from. So then Kenny becomes almost like a surrogate son also for him.
I was starting to say there's a lot of family stuff in this show, which there is. Yeah. Are there any shows where there isn't a lot of family stuff?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, though, I think you're picking up on something because when I watched, like I said, I watched some interviews with the cast, and one of the interviewers asked, like, because they don't know anything about what's going to happen and can't talk about it, he was asking other questions. So he was like, what are some of the themes that you see over the 3 seasons developing? And one of the things they talked about was like, what will you do for your family? Right. And like and how family is the thing that keeps you waking up every day and trying to keep going, even when life is like absolutely terrifying.
Right.
So that is there for sure. We get a quick shot of we find out is Colony House later on. The sheriff is looking at it through the binoculars, like looking unhappy. It looks like a more fun place to be.
Totally.
That's the people there
house.
Don't look sort of like bummed to be alive. Mm-hmm. They're just kind of hanging out. And then he goes into the post office, which is apparently where he lives.
96 days.
96 days without incident.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
No, not going to last much longer.
They've got a little routine going, though, clearly.
Yep. He touches his rock.
Mm-hmm. And you got to touch the rock.
Got to touch the rock. And locks up.
Oh, well, then we find out Frank is too drunk to go home.
Yes. So we go to the bar, which is also not originally a bar, I don't think. It's like another building that's been makeshift turned into the bar. But Frank is lying on the floor. And the bartender's trying to get him to leave. And he finally just gives up and locks up. And again, touches the rock and says Lauren's going to kill him, who's apparently his wife, who are, of course, waiting at the door for him to come home because it's sunset and you can't be out after dark, clearly.
Right, and he promised he would come home.
Yeah, and failed. So she sends the daughter upstairs. I think the daughter's name is Megan, to go say her prayers. And, if you want a creepy child, just have them say, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep."
There are they do a few things in this that are so tropey.
Yes.
But it works for me every time. And that's one of them.
That's one of them. Yeah. What's funny about this moment is, and I'd forgotten about it, but like how quick it happens.
Yeah.
There's no build up. Like the kid goes into the room, says the prayer, and then immediately the creepy old lady knocks on the window. Like there's no time to build up the tension there. It just happens immediately.
I kind of love it because, again, like I was saying earlier, there's another version of this show where what we see is we hear the knocking.
Yeah.
we
maybe
don't
the voice.
see anything.
Yeah.
Maybe we hear the voice, we cut, and then the next thing we see is the aftermath. But we see the grandma who the girl says, she says, like, she pulls the shade up. She says, it's me, your grandma, or whatever. She says, you don't look like my grandma.
Right.
But she asks to come in, and the little girl, knowing it doesn't look like her grandma, opens the window anyway.
I have to say, okay.
And we see her face change. It's a lot. You get a lot of information there.
Just quickly point out, this child is a fucking idiot.
Yes. You live in this town.
You live in this town. There is no way your parents have not told you from day one, do not open the windows after dark.
Totally.
You are stupid.
Especially because it's so clear that the threat is real.
Yeah. Yes. They've got a whole graveyard.
Like, for example, an episode of Evil where all Kristen has to do is not talk.
Yeah.
Because there is a threat, but we have no proof that this threat is real. Yeah. And so that you are compelled to talk.
Right. Yes.
This is not
I know.
that.
You watched the Silence episode last night.
So fun.
Yeah.
This is not that.
No. She's so dumb. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't really have much sympathy for that kid. The mom's doing her best. She comes upstairs, realizes like what's about to happen, and is telling her not to open the window. We don't realize though that something really terrible happened to them right away. We get the credits next. We just hear screams and then cut to credits.
This is another tropey thing. Can we talk about the credits for a second?
Please, go ahead.
Because it's a cover. It's the Pixies, actually. It's Pixies' cover of Que Sera. Mm-hmm. And so it's pop. Que Sera, like, it's a pop-ish song. It's a million years old.
Yeah.
But it's given the moody treatment.
Yeah.
And super Yellowjackets-y.
Yeah. And that song was
used
in Heathers also in a very similar creepy way.
Fun.
Yeah. And the credits are like shots of the woods and then creepy kid drawings of bloody people, which is like, come on.
Yeah. Again.
Yellowjackets.
Also way too long. These credits
they're
are
so
long.
Also, it reminded me of Last of Us. Creepy kid drawings come into Last of Us as well a lot in the first season.
Okay.
It's definitely
it's
like
way to, you want to spook people, make some creepy kid drawings.
Exactly. And sing a song that's supposed to be sort of lilting in a darker tone. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We get and then we get a shot of like bloody walls at the end of the credits.
Right.
And so it's the first time I think that we see not just like drawings or imagined representations of horror, but actual horror.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah. We then jump to the RV, which is our family that's about to enter this town. Mm-hmm. And so we have Jim and Tabitha and Julie, not Julia, and Ethan in their old RV trucking down the highway. They're on the highway, but then they get off on this country road exit. The big sister's being a bit of a dick to the little kid.
Yeah, in a very big sister way. You think it's sweet. She's like telling him a story because they've probably been in this fucking RV forever. What a nightmare.
Yeah.
But she gives it like a sad ending just to kind of fuck with him.
Yeah. And she like kills one of the finger puppets she's playing with. And then the mom has to come comfort him and says that monsters aren't real. Good news. And I wrote in all caps in my notes, foreshadowing.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. Like, oh God. We meet them briefly and then we go back to the town where Frank is walking home from the bar in the morning, his like walk of shame.
Yeah. And you get a really good look at all the cars here with the flat tires. And so just to like, one of the things I like about this pilot is that you see that, and it, to me, I'm like, oh, there was an event before I realized that all of these people have come in at different times and whatever. I'm like, oh, something disabled everything in this town. But no, we find out pretty quickly that's not the case. But that's what it looks like here, especially when you see the car flipped over in the pool and all of that.
And we find out pretty quickly in this episode why the tires are flat on the cars as well.
Chekhov's spike strip.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But we end up kind of immediately seeing like the very extreme consequences, right? It's, again, like you said, it's not the sort of subtle version of it. It's like he walks home, there's people outside his house. He's like, oh, she rope you in a bake sale again? And then Boyd comes out and screams at him and punches him in the face.
I think he actually slaps him really hard twice. And the choice of that, I'm so glad that you said that so that I could remember to say this.
Yeah.
It's such a funny choice because he really is like the town dad more than the town sheriff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, he's yelling at him and he says, you have kids, you nail the window shut.
A man protects his family, Frank.
Right, exactly.
The show could be called A Man Protects His Family, Frank.
Yeah, exactly. He like drags Frank inside, like shoving a dog's face in their own puke.
Exactly that.
Or shit.
I was going to say more shit.
More shit. I'm sorry, I've never had a dog, but
also, if that's how you're housebreaking your dogs, you're doing a bad job. Don't do that. People really think that's what you have to do.
Yeah,
That's my little PSA.
Yeah, negative reinforcement is not the best. All it does is make
your dog fear you.
Yes. But he brings him in and tells him he has to look at his dead wife and daughter who've been basically torn apart.
It is like brutal. They're like hollowed out.
Yeah. Yeah. And like splattered on the walls. It seems to be possibly the same shot in the credits of the walls behind the bed.
Right.
But Frank is falling apart. Kenny is already in the room and Boyd tells Kenny to take Frank and lock him up. He walks downstairs. There's a priest, like you mentioned, that arrives. And he says, like, they're all yours now or whatever. This is clearly a repeated event.
Yeah.
You know, where Boyd has to go deal with the repercussions and then the priest comes in to kind of perform his rites.
None of them are like shocked by any
Not at
of
all.
this.
Not at all.
They're not happy about it, but it is. Yeah. They have a routine for it.
Exactly.
For sure.
Exactly. And then Boyd sees the rock on the floor, picks it up, puts it in his pocket, which of course we'll come back to later. But yeah, we're kind of jumping back and forth from the two different converging groups of people. So we're back in the RV. You mentioned there's these like tropes. There's so many of them in this little brief moment. Like the kids are listening to headphones and ignoring everything that's going on. The parents are clearly having a tense moment that's supposed to be like a nice reminiscence about when Jim met her parents, but instead is like weirdly uncomfortable. We get a comment about, remembering what it was like before.
Yeah.
In quotes in my brain.
Right. Because we don't know why they're.
Right. What the tension is coming from.
Right. And why they're on this trip and how long they've been on it and where they're traveling from. Like, we really know nothing about their previous life.
Right. But again, I think why I thought this pilot was so strong was partly because we don't know any of those things, but we know a lot based on their interactions with each other.
Right. Yeah.
Like all of those little signposts are there. Like, oh, something traumatic happened to this family. The parents are having trouble. The kids are clearly affected by it, but are still kids, But then there's a tree in the road, so they can't go the direction they were planning on going. They get out of the RV.
Here's a quick question. And maybe this is just my inability to like form mental maps very well.
Yeah.
If they just moved the tree, I'm not saying would the people trapped in the town be able to get out, but would it stop more people from becoming trapped in the town because they wouldn't have to turn back and happen upon it?
That's a legitimate question. I don't know the answer to it. Clearly, the tree is quite heavy. The kid tries to move it, which does not work. But he's like having his little climbing up on it moment, like his little childlike moment. And then a murder of crows.
Of course.
A murder of crows appears and starts circling overhead, making ominous crow noises.
Again, you just said they pack a lot of little kind of like tropey signposts here, and here's one of them.
Gotta love a creepy crow. I mean, not to sound like a broken record, but like a lot of these shows have this motif of birds knowing things, right? Or birds being signs of something,
right.
you know, like in Yellowjackets when all the birds die.
Yeah, that's because that's true in real life.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Like I will not continue to watch Dark. I'm done. I'm annoyed with it.
That's good to know.
But there is in Dark a lot of bird death symbolism also. The sheriff shows up at Colony House, which is our next scene.
Right. And we get a lot here too. It's another one where it is really good at so far, knowing nothing else about the show. It feels to me like it's really good at setting up and giving us enough to help us ask the questions we think the show wants us to ask.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
There's clearly some divide between Colony House, specifically seems to be negotiated by Donna and Boyd.
Yep. We get our tough older lady, Donna, who I love.
She seems pretty cool.
Yeah. She says they have an agreement that he doesn't come there.
Right.
But he wants to see his son, who apparently lives at Colony House, Ellis. So she brings him inside.
A man protects his family, but there's something going on with Ellis and Boyd for sure.
Exactly. His son is creepily sketching his girlfriend.
It's
supposed to be sweet.
But it does feel creepy to me. Maybe it's just the whole vibe of the show. Maybe it's the kids' drawings being in the opening credits. So there's something about illustration in this show that feels creepy to me.
Also, Ellis is just Ellis has this I don't know what it is about his shirt being unbuttoned too much and the necklace. I'm like, you're just there's just a vibe. I feel like you're like a self-satisfied, like maybe spoiled kid or something.
Yeah.
You know?
And we don't get enough for me to know if that's fair, but it is the feeling I get, especially because I'm like, Boyd has got a lot going on.
Yeah. We meet him through Boyd's perspective a little bit. Yeah.
And so I don't know, but they are clearly strained.
Yes. And I think one of the other reasons you feel that way maybe is that his girlfriend, Fatima, clearly doesn't have a problem with Boyd.
Yeah. She's happy to see him.
Yeah. She likes him. You can kind of tell.
That's a really good point. And we don't get much of her, but I like her enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So. She seems like kind of a logical, practical, mature person in the 3 seconds that we meet her.
Right. Yeah. Good. That's really well noticed, because I'll bet you're right, because then whatever is going on between Boyd and Ellis is personal. It's not that necessarily that Boyd is a bad guy, and I haven't felt like he's a bad guy yet.
Right.
And so that makes it easier for me to side with Boyd in this case.
Yeah.
Also because I'll be 40 in a year, so maybe I've just got no point where I'm going to side with the dad. I don't know. But he invites him down for the funeral. Right.
And there's clearly some reason he thinks that Ellis would want to come to this specific funeral. We don't know why, but it's literally he gets cut off. He says, he tells them that it's Lauren and Megan that died. And he says, Lauren was and then he gets cut off by Ellis. He says, I know who Lauren is.
Right.
But he's not coming to the service, apparently. So, and then we get back to the RV where suddenly they're they're not in Western Virginia, but they have lost service. The kid's asking about the crows and the sister is teasing him again.
So in this scene, the mom says the thing about oh, I think it was ravens.
Yes.
They're called unkindness. Isn't that better? Is this also the scene where she retells the story for him about how one of them is still alive? One of the characters?
Oh, that's before. That's in the scene before when they're...
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we get the unkindness of ravens. There's something about this mom where she seems... fine. So I know it's a make-believe story, but her willingness to just sort of lie to him to make him feel better is why there are a lot of reasons I've never wanted kids, but one of them is that I know you're not really supposed to lie to kids, and I would constantly. She's doing the wrong thing here, because this is play is how you help kids face things like death.
Right.
But she's shielding him from that, though we do get a little tiny kind of reveal toward the end of this that it could explain why she wants to shield him so much.
But we do kind of get a sense that she's there's something kind of off about her parenting.
Yeah, and this is one of the first moments where I start to be like, what you doing, lady?
Yeah. Well, she's denying the reality of it.
Exactly.
You know, like they were crows.
They were crows.
They're called a murder of crows. Yeah. But she's like lying to the kid. But this is when they come into the town finally, and we get the intersection of these two groups of people. Yeah.
They're so creepy here. They don't really need to be, because Boyd says, like, that's the other thing. Just the immediate locking into, like, well, a new people. Here we go, guys.
Yeah.
You know, like, there's no chance that this plays out differently for them.
Right.
He says, like, Kenny and I'll handle it. He doesn't say directly, like, don't talk to them, but he says, like, remember how it was for you, leave them alone.
Yeah, he says leave him be. It's clear that is an instruction to let just the sheriff talk to them.
Exactly.
Because literally people ignore them. They like directly ask questions and people just walk away.
It's like, guy.
Yeah.
You know, like, I understand leave them be. I think that's right.
Yeah.
But I also think, like, you know, these people are going to be living in your town, and now the first impression they have of you is that you're all children of the corn. Like,
exactly.
Just like a warm smile would be more appropriate, but whatever.
Yeah. They drive past, the sheriff just tells them to keep driving, and
it's really sad, because it is like, oh, you've got to wear them out first.
Yeah.
Like
they have to go through this sort of mental process of realizing for themselves, instead of, you can't just tell them, oh, sorry, you're stuck. You can't leave. Like, they're not going to accept that. They have to go around a number of times to discover it for themselves.
I love a stuck loop. I love a stuck loop when it comes to time travel or space. Like, I don't know what it is. I love them. Like, I have nightmares that I get stuck in a loop like this. I clocked it immediately. I was watching it with Kitsy, and it was like before they even started to pull away. And again, I know nothing about the show. I was like, here we go. Yeah, it's a loop. Like, I'm always waiting for a loop. Yeah, made me very happy.
And a good chunk of this pilot is watching them try again to get out of it and kind of spiral, literally
trying to rationalize it each time. And
yep. So they come back around. They try to ask Sarah, who is by far the creepiest person in this show.
Sarah, what's your deal?
Yeah. She completely ignores them and walks away. She comes home. We find out she has a brother, and they live together, and that's Sarah and Nathan.
And they also seem the most, like, if you found out, you said there's been some time travel speculation, and if that's the case, if you found out these two were from, 1920,
right,
you might believe it. They're like they're just off. Feel off in a way the rest of the town doesn't.
Well, especially Nathan, who has this like weird cheerful aspect. He's going to feed the animals, and he's just kind of like joking around. And Sarah says this is the cruelest part. The looping around while you're realizing, that you can't leave. They're starting to argue more in the RV. It's very like, she's just saying, oh, maybe it's a switchback and blah, blah, blah. And like, he gets back into town, makes a U-turn, tries going the other direction. Like, and we get Kenny asking the sheriff if he thinks they're ready. They've been waiting for them to get to this point, I guess. So he tells Kenny to get the strip.
Right.
Chekhov's spike strip. Yeah.
And then that's when you realize, like, oh, those flat tires were on purpose.
Right. Yeah, because it's not like if the tires were working, they'd be able to use the car to leave.
Right. It's just to kind of be like,
got to stop it at some point. Boyd says something that implies that, like, we don't want an RV barreling through town. I think he says it a little bit later, but like, I think they're waiting for that perfect moment where like the people in the RV have realized something is quite wrong and it's not working, but they're not so freaked out that they're going to like cause serious damage.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a little formula here. But before that can even happen, we find out, man, bad timing, because how often are new people coming into this town?
It doesn't seem like very often.
But all of a sudden there's this other car kind of careening across the road, and there's an accident.
Yeah, the RV flips. Yeah. And Tabitha, at this point, we think she might be dead.
Yeah.
Because she's not responsive.
Another thing that really made this compelling to me is like, I was 100% sure she was dead. Yeah. And I was like, oh, now part of this is this dad grappling with the grief of losing his wife and having to keep his 2 children alive who are also mourning her death. Like,
right. No, she's just knocked out.
Yep.
But Ethan is not in great shape.
Oof.
Ethan has a table leg through his leg.
Ugh, it's brutal.
Not great.
Not great at all.
Yeah, I will say also, like, we've talked about my uncomfortable feeling about really gory shit. Mm-hmm. And, like, there's something so over the top about the gore in this show that I, like, when the guts are splattered on the wall, I'm like, okay, art department had fun there. But when a kid has a table leg through his thigh, that's a little worse for me.
Too real.
Yeah, it's like a more real possibility, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
We see the guy we find out 2 guys stumble out of the car that caused the accident, immediately throws up and starts walking towards town. Something wrong with him.
Yeah. Under the influence is my guess.
Yeah, it seems like
all over.
It seems like they both are. The other guy in the car who we meet shortly after.
Jade.
Yeah. But the first guy walks up to both Kenny and Boyd putting the tack strip down. And you can see the shock on their faces when they realize there's a second vehicle. Like, that's the thing that, like, the one car going through the town, the RV going through the town, they're like, oh boy, here we go.
Right.
But then when they find out there's a second car, it seems like that's quite unusual. Mm-hmm. So the deputy brings the first guy to the clinic and Boyd goes off to the accident scene.
And that's where we meet Jade, who is so fun. He says Boyd has an amazing face.
Yes. Right before that, though, we do see Christy bringing in Toby to the clinic.
Oh, right.
The first guy.
Sorry,
and handing him off to Gina, the other nurse, to go set him up with an IV, which I noted is literally a jar, like a glass jar with a tube attached to it.
Doing the best they can with what they've got.
Yikes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, we do meet Jade. Jade. We meet Jade here, who stumbles out of the car, seems very high. Mm-hmm. He gets handcuffed to the car, does not care.
Nope.
He's like, all right,
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'll stay here. Boyd runs down to check on the folks in the RV. This is where we see that Tabitha is still alive. He checks her pulse.
Right.
Julie, the daughter, is totally freaking out. Ethan's got a table leg through his leg. Things seem kind of dire.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And then we see Ellis does make it down after the funeral. It looks like he's like leaving flowers for them.
Yeah, clearly he had some connection to them. He just was not willing to actually go to the service.
Right.
But the priest pulls up in a truck and asks Ellis to come help with the chaos that's happening just outside of town. Mm-hmm. And Ellis also seems shocked that there's a second car.
Right. Also, another little note where the priest says, near something like down the road from Colony House or something. So we know it's close enough to Colony House.
Right.
That when when we have to get somewhere quickly.
Right.
We already know it's nearby.
Yeah. We briefly get a scene of them bringing Toby, this first person, in, and Mr. Liu saying, I don't like him. Mm-hmm. He made a mess.
Yeah. She's Gina, it's not exactly his fault.
Yeah. Gina gets Mr. Liu back downstairs again to the basement.
Right. You gotta
get him in the basement. But they show up at the accident scene. Christy goes to Jade, who's handcuffed to the car. We get that moment where they're talking about the New York plates, the Boston relationship.
Jade says that he says something about them all being beautiful.
Yes.
And it's so, to me, it's just such a funny thing to say to a cast of characters on a TV show. Because, of course they're all beautiful. You're in a TV show, Jade.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote, Jade thinks everyone is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. I literally wrote, Jade thinks everyone is beautiful.
Yeah, he does. Mm-hmm. Kenny brings Christy down to the RV to help out because she is the town's apparently only real medical professional of any kind. She seems very capable, though.
Yeah.
That's what I appreciate about her character in this first episode is like, because we're getting set up for this idea of like really smart women and really like bullheaded men. It's such a trope. Like, there's a lot of those sort of common tropes in this show, but like that is definitely one of them is like, guys are doing their best and look at these smart women holding shit together behind the scenes, right? And Christy's clearly one of them.
It reminded me too, the whole thing with the clinic and her as the EMT reminded me of the episode of Station 11 when they show up at the when what's his face shows up at the housewares store that has been converted into like a maternity ward.
Yes, yeah.
Where it's like they're really getting a lot done with very little.
Exactly.
And it's cool to see. And
yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, that's has that same feeling for sure. Like a makeshift space.
Which I don't know what it is, but I'm such a sucker for this kind of thing. Like all I want is to know how this town operates on like a logistical level.
Yeah.
Like
we need MTV Cribs, but for Fromville.
Exactly. Like when Nathan says like, or I think Sarah says like the animals aren't going to feed themselves. One of them says it.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, good, livestock.
Right. Exactly. We briefly go to the clinic again because Sarah is being creepy. Mm-hmm. She's like force feeding Toby some water and saying that he's safe now.
Everything's going to be all right.
Yeah, she is.
Is it Sarah?
Is it Sarah? No, probably not. Definitely not. Mm-mm. But they bring Tabitha out of the RV. But we keep getting these reminders that daylight is fading.
Right.
It's like 40 minutes of daylight. Christy needs at least an hour to safely get Ethan stabilized somehow.
My favorite line read in this episode is Boyd asks, can you fix him in the RV? We get the reveal, like you said, he still has the talisman in his pocket.
Right.
Kenny says, will that even work?
Yeah.
Like, will putting that up in the RV...
Right. Protect them.
The way Boyd says, I don't know, the way that he's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was like, it was your idea, man.
Yeah.
It's so funny that he like just immediately is like, how the fuck should I know? We've never dealt with something like this before.
Yeah.
It made me laugh. Like it was like an out loud laugh. That line delivery is just perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it could have been real serious about it. Like he could have been like, I don't know, but he's like, I don't fucking know.
How would I know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good line read also because it gives us in one line like a sense of Boyd is just trying to figure it out as he goes.
Exactly.
Like
Correct.
doing the best he can with like this weird situation that he doesn't understand. Mm-hmm. But Boyd is like, they've got to go. Yeah. He says the woods are not safe after dark and that Boyd doesn't want to bury any more kids.
Yeah. Oof.
Yikes. Because like we know Megan, the little girl, just died, but it sounds like it's not the first.
No, and their reaction to the death of that kid, that is not, like, Megan is not the first child they buried in that town.
Definitely not.
At all.
Definitely not. We go back to Sarah and Toby. He asks if everything's going to be okay, or if everyone is okay, excuse me. Mm-hmm. And she says, I don't think so.
You're right.
She's just, that girl is really good at that dead, stared, creepy face.
It's also fun to have a threat, a weird kind of because she also, when she and Nathan are having their little back and forth and then he goes off, she goes to go in the house and she pauses for a second.
Yeah.
It's before she has said anything really weird.
Yeah.
And her face, she looks like there's like anguish. She's clearly like,
yes,
something is weighing on her.
Yeah. She's not like an evil robot. Like she has very, very heavy things on her mind. But then she does get weird. Mm-hmm. Because he asks if everyone's okay. She says, I don't think so, in a very calm way. Mm-hmm. And he says, I shouldn't have been. He's clearly distraught. And she kisses him.
Right.
Says, this isn't your fault. And then stabs him in the neck.
They make it a point to show.
Yeah, I didn't look at that part.
So, Jodie, it goes through his like, mandible up through the roof of his, or through the like bottom of his mouth, through his tongue, and you see it in his open mouth as he's screaming.
Yeah, no, like I didn't see that.
Well, that's what you missed.
Thanks so much.
And it's, but I mean, like, up until this point, other than the little weirdness of Sarah that we've seen, it seems like the threat is external, and these people are gathered together to protect one another and themselves from the outside.
And then we find out, also maybe the threat is internal. Mm-hmm. Or maybe there's something so scary and bad about people coming in from the outside, or certain people coming in from the outside, that Sarah knows and is trying to protect the town herself.
Right. Can she sense something in Toby?
We've been set up to realize that this second car is really strange. Mm-hmm. Right. And so Toby and Jade came in on the second car. So we're like a little more suspicious of them than we are of the RV people, kind of automatically.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see how she reacts to Jade if and when they meet.
Right. So yeah, we're back in the RV situation, and they're trying desperately to get people back to the town before it gets dark. But they realize that they can't get Ethan out before then. So it kind of is like they split up a little bit. Like Boyd is going to stay with the RV with Jim and Ethan and Christy. And Kenny is going to take the mom and Julie to town.
They're really competent, these townspeople, in a way that is so refreshing. I know it's because they've been dealing with this for so long, but they haven't been dealing with this exact scenario. Right. And they do a pretty good job problem solving. Yeah. Without just saying, hey, new people, fuck you. Yeah. Like, it's us against the world. Like, that is not it's very lost. It's very live together, die alone of them.
Yes, it is. It is. So they're setting up the RV to try to be safe for the night. Mm-hmm. You know, Boyd is covering all the windows and hanging up the special rock. And they're trying to gauge like how much Jim can handle knowing at this moment, I think.
Yeah, I think it's right before they actually get into the RV. Tabitha says we have to go back. Like she says something like Thomas is in there. Right. And Jim has to be like,
it's Ethan.
Ethan's in there. And then you're like, we got a dead kid.
We got a dead kid. Exactly. Tabitha says she doesn't trust them. But yeah, so they get in the truck and try to take Tabby and Julie back to the town while Boyd is like getting blankets to cover the windows and hanging up the talisman. And Jim is like, what the fuck is going on? What are you trying to protect us from?
Can you imagine?
Yeah. We flip to the pickup truck that hits the spikes, check off spikes in the road.
Pretty good.
But they realize that they're close enough to Colony House that they can get there. But this is where the kind of facade of calmness falls, because Kenny is like, don't look at anything. No matter what you see, run as fast as you can. Just get to Colony House. And they're like, what? There's a sense of, somebody says like, will they even let us in?
Right.
And I think, isn't Ellis with them at this point? And he's like, they'll let you in.
He seems pretty sure.
Yeah. But then back in the RV, the shit is starting to go down. Ethan's seizing. Jim's like getting a little belligerent about like knowing what the fuck is happening. Mm-hmm. And then we hear the howling.
So scary, the noises. Boyd says there are a few lines in this that are the word choice is so specific. He says there are things you have to understand about what happens next. Yeah. And there's something about the way that's put together. It's like, I don't think this is what's happening. I don't think it's the kind of loop where they have relived this and Boyd knows that, but other people don't. Right. But I know that he's saying like here every night these creatures come out, but there's just like a knowingness that Boyd has that feels a little beyond that. Again, I don't think that's actually what's going on. Right. But it's just such a peculiar way to say that. Like to understand about what happens next, not like what's about to going to or what's not like what's going to happen, right? Not what happens every night here, like about what happens next. Like he knows. Yeah. Well, and I think that also is kind of indicating his competence and like control or like attempted control over the situation every night. I think that's exactly right. You know, starting with the ringing of the bell and then, ending here where he's like, this is what's going to happen. This is what we need to do. Like he is trying desperately to be the person that keeps everyone safe. Right. But we hear the howling from the woods. And it's funny, like we saw the grandma. Fun. Yeah. We saw the grandma in the window, which was our first hint that these are like people like, but it looks just like very slow moving, creepy people walking towards the RV. Yeah. And they're they're a little washed out. Like they look a little bit like they're not really in black and white, but they could be. Yeah. They're desaturated. Yeah. There you go. Thank you. I'm so glad we have an artist here. Yeah. And they're like hard to place in time. To go back to the first one that we see, the little girl says, "You don't look like my grandma." But she is an old woman. She's in like, it almost looks like mourning clothes kind of. But then the people we see later, like one of them, she looks like a librarian. They don't look monstrous to begin with, though. We see that first woman with the way those teeth come out.
Yeah, it's like they appear sort of like maybe normal, slightly dead or reincarnated people.
Yeah, it's like Buffy vampires. They kind of like turn it on when they need to use it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I do remember that there's a little bit less cheesiness in the monsters in this show, but not no cheesiness later on. But yeah, that's where we end it with the scary people approaching the RV, the half the family running towards Colony House, the other half of the family like hunkered down with a very injured child in an RV upside down in the woods.
Stakes are very clear.
Yeah.
Especially the one through that little boy's leg. But thank you so much. I think it's a great cliffhanger. It's not so like, I don't know. I mentioned, maybe I didn't, I think we cut it out, but like Silo, every episode ends on a cliffhanger and some of them are a little too cliffhangy. Yeah. Where it's like, it kind of feels like they were like, we need to do something here. But it just feels like it was building to this in such a natural way. I think the pacing is really good.
Yeah. It's funny because I haven't watched this first season in probably a couple of years, at least a year. And when I watched the pilot again, I had forgotten that all of this stuff happens in the pilot. Like I remembered the accident with the RV and the car as happening in like episode 3 or something. Like I in my brain, it happened much later and the pilot was more of a setup. But that's why I remember thinking this was like such an interesting pilot and such an interesting introduction to a show, because they do actually, a lot happens. Yeah. This is not a like setting the table and trusting that you'll be interested enough to hang on. It's like, no, we're going to like have shit go on. We're going to set up this whole thing. We're going to give you a lot of character information in order to kind of propel you into the next episode. And I mean, that's what happened to me. And that's how I ended up watching the entire first season.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm curious to see how and if it continues to pull me along.
Yeah, I am too.
Let's talk questions real quick.
There's a lot of them.
It sets a ton up. The first one I kind of started to ask and put a pin in is like, these creatures in the woods, are they the original townspeople? Right. When you die, do you get added to the fold?
Right. Because they look like normal people. They're not like they look like they could have a couple months ago been one of the people in the town that's going to the diner for breakfast.
And she says, you don't look like my grandma. But does that mean like because you look like a weird monster version of my grandma?
Right.
Or because that's not my grandma and she's just,
Yeah, saying that to get into the window.
Right.
Yeah. Another big one for me is like, and you touched on this earlier, but like clearly most, if not all of these people came from somewhere else. So like, why these people? Like, is it random that if you take this wrong turn, too bad, you're stuck there? Or are they being drawn there for a reason? A little bit of the lost of it all, Like, is this a specific group?
Yeah, exactly. And what I'm realizing now that I hadn't, and this is kind of like a compliment to how well put together this pilot is, but it's like, okay, we got monsters in the woods that are time sensitive. They're like solar powered and they've got to charge.
Yeah, they charge during the day.
I'm going to pin another question here because I want to say we've got loops, something sticking people here. We've got something going on with Sarah that seems different. We've got some sort of protective magic in the talisman. Any one of those things could be a mystery in a show. That's a lot of that it's not immediately clear to me how all of those things are connected. Right. Because you could have a stuck town without monsters. You could have monsters in a town where you're not stuck. Like there's lots of, and so I, now knowing how frustrated some people are by this show, I'm like, now what I almost, if I continue watching this show, it will be with the hope that actually they just continue throwing random shit at me and expecting me to figure out what the hell's going on. Because I have no problem with that.
May satisfy you then, because in the limited experience I had, which I think was only season 1, it felt like it kept asking questions without providing answers, but it kept adding questions, which you may like. I was like, give me a fucking answer for once.
If I know that's what it's going to be, I'm so fine with if
you're so much more patient than I am.
But I think it's because I think it comes from Lost, where that show didn't pretend to be that at first. And I just had I'm such a fierce defender of that show, and I don't always make this known, but I was frustrated. Of course I was.
Yeah.
But if I were going in to watch, if Lost, this is hard to explain. If Lost were a new show now, but I had the training from watching the original Lost somehow,
yeah,
I would be fine, because I'm just ready to roll with the show for the most part, like with whatever they want to throw at me, as long as I know what I'm getting into.
Yeah. And I do think that knowing that, and the creators making it very clear that they have answers, they exist. Cool. They have everything wrapped up in their minds. Like, it does make it, I think, easier to go along for the ride and just say, like, I'll find out someday.
Right.
You know?
Mm-hmm. I thought of another question that I have. Mm-hmm. It's a really specific one, but I wonder, the creatures in the woods, do they disappear in the daytime? Like, do they not exist at all? Or do they, like vampires, go back to some place?
Yeah.
And if so, they're clearly so powerful. But if so, if the townspeople had enough, like, firepower, could they go find them in the daytime and destroy their location? And if not, what brings them out? Like, what creates them at night?
And also, regardless of that, like, is that connected to why they're stuck? Like,
right, exactly.
Because they could kill off all the monsters and still never be able to leave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or
like,
they could find, right, and then hold on. Now we're speculating, Jodie. Now we're getting somewhere. Separately, is there a way to break whatever is keeping them locked in? Is the thing that's keeping them also keeping those creatures? Because if they break the loop, does that then unleash these creatures into the rest of the world? And so the loop is actually protective.
There's something that happens. I'm not sure if it's during season 1 or into season 2. If it's in season 2, that means I actually watched part of season 2.
Okay.
That gets a little bit at the breaking the loop idea. I'm not going to say any more than that. Are you going to continue for now? I know you have evil to continue with, so you're busy. You got a lot on your agenda.
My worry is that the show might be a little too bleak for me right now to spend a ton of time in.
I think that was part of my problem too.
And so in that case, like, there's a reason that evil is the show. It's the same, like, it's you with Dawson's Creek.
Yeah.
There's a reason that this is the show that I have been just able to watch 5 episodes at a time of. I said it last week. It's candy. And
this is not candy. This is like
candy.
This is like a cup of very bitter tea or something.
Yeah. And so there's a real chance that I might just...
Yeah.
I feel like people are going to hate hearing this from somebody who reviews TV, every week. But, like, I might just read the Wikipedia and then check back in when season 4 comes out.
Yeah. So some breaking news. I actually watched the full second season as well.
Beep, 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 beep.
Yeah. Breaking news. I just looked at the episode list, and
that's so funny.
The moment that I alluded to is the last episode of season 2.
Really good to know. That's so funny.
I made it through 2 seasons, got extremely frustrated.
Wow, that's a lot.
I know. Well, this came out. So the second season came out in 2023. But yeah, so I made it through 20 episodes and just stopped at season 3.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Oh, also, to be fair, season 3 came out quite a ways after, like a year and some months after season 2 ended.
Oh, so like pretty recently.
Yeah. September of 2024 was when season 3 premiered.
That was like yesterday.
Yeah. Yes.
Does it drop all at once?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. That's good to know for our purposes.
Yeah. Oh, wait, no, it actually came out weekly. I'm looking at the schedule.
Oh,
yeah.
That's even better to know for our purposes.
Yeah. So the season 3, episode 1 came out on September 22nd, and then it aired weekly. So 29th, and it ended. The last episode didn't come out until November 24th of this past year. So like 2 months ago, not even month and a half.
Hey, Jody, from a producer standpoint, there's a real chance I'm going to watch every episode so that we have the option to cover season 4.
There you go.
When season 4
2026.
In 2026.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be about halfway through our wait of Yellowjackets season 4, so that's fine.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm curious to see
Severance season 3.
Good Lord. I'm curious to see what you think if you do keep going, especially because they compare it to Lost so much. Mm-hmm. It's constantly in conversation with it. Like everything is, they're doing this thing that they did in Lost, or like they better have the answers that Lost didn't have, like all that stuff. So
I think it's a vibe thing more than anything. I can feel how this might be tough to spend a lot of time in.
Yeah.
You know what show isn't tough to spend a lot of time in? Is it time? Do you have more to say about From before I transition?
No, I don't. So, yes, a show that is not a slog. Something about me that is not my favorite thing about myself, but maybe something that you have realized at this point in our knowing each other, is that I really like being right.
Hold on, the last episode I watched of Evil, Kristen is wearing pajamas, and the shirt says, "Boy, do I hate being right all the time."
Maybe that's why I like the show. And the thing I was right about is that you would like this show, or that you would keep watching this show. And I just really enjoy being right about things.
It gets progressively more fun, too.
Yes, it does. So tell me where you are right now.
I'm halfway through season 2.
Okay, so what episode? So you watched the...
Silence was the last one that I watched.
S is for Silence. Okay. And next is B is for Brian. Got it. The next one's fun.
It's like they're so fun at being like, well, let's just have a little premise.
Yeah.
And let's just play around with it and see what happens every week. It's so stupid. Sometimes it's so heavy-handed.
Yeah.
They really are trying, which I do I do commend them for, but it's funny because it's such a silly show, and then sometimes they'll have an episode about like racial bias in the police force.
Yeah.
In their silly show.
Yes. Yep.
And I really do, like I said, like sometimes it feels a little like, because the show is so silly.
Yeah.
But like, I really like that they're like, yeah, we have this dumb, silly show, but we're still going to try to say something here and there.
Well, because I think people like you and me, I don't think would engage with it as much if it was just kind of like using a flat, a flat caricature of the church without acknowledging anything else about it.
Right, exactly.
It's like, because I'm not excited to like spend a lot of time thinking about the Catholic Church, but like I'm not, if there's no nod at all to reality, it starts to feel like too surface level or something.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like how Brooklyn Nine-Nine had to be like, we're a cop show. Like,
yeah,
at some point, like, we've got to deal with that. And it's also, I think one of the things for me is that like I know a lot about what am I trying to say? I know a lot about the religion by osmosis, but I don't have any personal stake in it.
Right.
It's not even like I'm a lapsed Catholic, so I have some of that rattling around. So it's also easy for me to engage with it that way. And
I mean, it would be really tone deaf to do a show that's all about Catholicism and never mention anything about the sexism,
well, it's funny
priests,
because do you think this show is pro-religion?
I do, actually.
Isn't that weird?
Yes. Yeah.
I think so, too.
The fact that I'm enjoying a show or enjoyed a show, that is, it does, especially when you get to the end, like, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, obviously, but like, it definitely doesn't back away from that throughout the seasons. It doesn't come around to a point where it's like, actually, there's all these great explanations that science is going to give you. It does not go there. Like, it keeps it open-ended, but it really is like, I do think it's a pro-belief show.
Isn't that wild?
I know.
Hold on, the episode, I kept yelling, oh, fun, when they do the exorcism with the mother is Muslim and the father is Catholic.
Yes.
And so they each bring in a leader from their church. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's so fun.
I know.
And they also, I love a show about people becoming friends.
Oh, I know.
It's really sweet to watch them all get to know each other.
Yeah.
I said early on, I like anytime there are three people, I'm like, Golden Trio.
Yeah.
But like they really are.
Yeah.
Like Golden Trio isn't the right word because I always say that, but that's like Harry Potter specific. But the like power trio.
Yeah.
So it's the Freudian trio where it's like the id, the ego, and the superego, and you can map them so directly with these three.
Yeah.
And I'm such a sucker for that kind of relationship.
Yeah. And I mean,
so
one thing I appreciate about it is that like there's obvious sexual tension between David and Kristen from day one.
It's double because she's married and he's married to the church.
Yes, he is married to the church. But what I like is that Ben, the third, member of this trio, there's never any false like, oh, let's pretend that maybe there's a love triangle, because that would seem really disingenuous.
Yep.
And they don't go there really.
No, but Ben and Kristen do have a special,
they have a very sweet
friendship
yes.
that is not about David.
And
they passed the Bechdel test.
Yeah. And her kids call him Ben the Magnificent.
Ben the Magnificent.
Yeah.
So
I really
cute.
like his relationship with that family and how it seems to be really just based on them appreciating each other and not anything,
Yeah, it's just nice. And they even, when her husband, this is so spoilery, people. So if you're going to watch Evil, it's also a hard show that's kind of hard to spoil because it is.
Yeah, it's like an episodic.
Yeah, it's like X-Files. There's like a myth arc happening.
Yeah.
But then there's also a Monster of the Week, and it kind of doesn't matter. It's so fun that like, who cares? But like when her husband does come back, he thinks that maybe Ben, before he meets them all, is the threat because that's the one the kids are talking about.
Right. Ben is the one that's clearly been to the house and the kids have some sort of relationship with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, Andy there's an episode.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, it's just that Andy's a weird character.
He's just kind of there to be in the way a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
I just don't. Also, he sounds just like Ryan Reynolds. But he's also Uncle Rad on Bluey, just so everybody knows.
Oh.
And I feel like all you need... Here's what I would say if I were selling somebody on this show. Mm-hmm. There is an episode where Ben teams up with some ghost hunters.
Oh,
TV show ghost hunters.
Yes.
To investigate one of the most haunted strip clubs in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Not the most haunted.
No,
because there's more than one.
Yeah.
This is just one of the most haunted.
Yeah. Yes.
That's perfect. That's so funny.
I know. They really have a great sense of humor in the premises and in the sort of specificity. Like you talked about last week when you watched or read the interview with the creators, where we kind of joked about how they have this like older person's interest in internet culture. Mm-hmm. But there's also some really sharply observed bits about like TV culture, about ghost hunter shows and things like that. Like it feels a little bit like a show like a procedural hospital show or a detective show where they're kind of reacting to current events and pulling them into the show. Mm-hmm.
That's people keep saying Law and Order, totally true, especially with the interviews where it's like, it's the John Mulaney bit, but it's like they're always like talking to somebody who's in the middle of whatever their real job is. But that's also House. House does this too. I think you have to remember that so much of what we watch is like a streaming show that gets to spend 5 years working on making each episode feel like a movie. Yeah. And so that's from. Then we got to remember Evil is a fucking CBS show.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing you need to know.
Yeah. Oh, you've gotten to know Sister Andrea a bit more now, too.
She rules.
I love Sister Andrea.
Sister Andrea
She
rules.
continues to rule.
It's
like,
just, I like
nothing
everybody.
better than a tiny old lady that, like, fights demons.
And takes no shit.
Takes no shit from priests. Yeah. Mm-hmm. She's really great.
Also, not Ben, Leland.
Oh, yeah, of course. Michael Emerson.
He's just... The way they let him get bigger and bigger and more absurd, and just like he's so over the top in his evilness. Yeah. It's so fun.
He's feasting on this role.
Oh my God. It's perfect for him. And he just is, he's so, I laugh so much. I can't believe how much I like this show.
Yeah, I know. I find it very satisfying.
Yeah, exactly. And like,
oh no, I meant that you like it.
Oh,
for me personally.
Okay, I got it. Got it. And also, Dylan Baker shows up.
Yeah.
Who we just talked about with Tara Jane Caspero is one of my great loves.
Yeah.
And he's here. They got everything for Andrea. They got haunted strip clubs in Jersey. Yep. They got Dylan Baker.
What more could you want?
What more could you want?
I do love some of the more social media adjacent plot lines are going to feel dated in like a year. Yeah. But they're so funny. Like there's a lot of the kids being really social media literate and the parents being like, what is the TikTok clone?
Yeah.
Like
I don't know why. Yeah, you're right. A lot of it already feels dated.
Yeah.
And I don't care. I can't. It's because the show knows it's silly.
Yeah. It's like you just watched did you watch the elevator one?
Yeah. Okay, hold on. The elevator game is real. Like, I'm not saying it exists.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes. It's pulled from a real myth.
That I like... Man, I love an urban legend. I love that's the other thing that makes the show. And like some of the episodes, I'm so sorry, listeners. If you want to leave now. Next week, we're going to wrap up Silo. Yeah. I want to keep talking about evil forever. Yeah. So thank you for being here. WatchersPodNJ@gmail.com. Yeah. Well, but whatever. We'll see you next week. But if you have watched Evil and or just want to listen to me and Jodie have a good time. Yeah. I'm just going to talk about episodes I loved because there's the one, I don't think it's a great episode, but there's it's their Amazon episode with the warehouse worker Z is for zombies. Yep. But it feels like an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark where the kids are kind of leading the adventure and they like travel into a spooky shop and they get little solutions to like, and it like,
yeah, it's but very, it's not, but to me it felt very, fortune teller, the dirt mall.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. It's just like every week, because of how the show is structured, every week they get to do another silly, fun thing while still bringing us back to the main story. They also, in really fun, actually thoughtful ways, find ways to bring us back around to previous episodes that you're not necessarily expecting. Yeah.
And that like continues.
LaRue shows back up, Orson LaRue, in a really interesting way. Yeah. In a really... I'm going to edit this next part out, Jodie, because it's a spoiler. It's a big spoiler. Yeah. But, and then, because I was like, when she said, I like screamed.
They could have dragged that out for the rest of the season or the rest of the series.
Okay, so I said I'm going to edit that out. I did. Big spoiler. But it made me think a little bit of what's going to happen to Shauna because, and I mean the rest of them too, but like there's a crime happening right now in Yellowjackets that they're not, it's like annoying that they either have to, like something has to happen or they have to drag it out forever. And they don't do that here.
Yeah. No, there's definitely like not an interest in... It almost feels like the opposite of a mystery box show. Like they're not interested in creating these long-term questions. They're
other than the like one big one-ish.
Right. But they also, I mean, you also kind of know that question's never going to be fully answered.
Right. Because how can it be?
Exactly. So like they're just interested in giving you like a little case studies that you can kind of enjoy and then put down.
I don't want to act. I mean, I do want to. We could be an evil rewatch podcast, and I'd be thrilled with that. But I want to just take a little minute to talk about the episode that, like, I was so happy they did it. And we mentioned it earlier already, but it's S is for silence. And they cue it up the episode before where they find out that they're going to be sent to investigate something happening at a monastery in upstate New York where no one has spoken for 130 years or something.
Yeah. And they're going because there's a corpse that is not decaying, and they think it might be like a saint or something. Right,
that he's got a potential for sainthood, so they have to investigate that and see if he's conducted a second miracle, because there are rules for sainthood. Everybody knows that.
Of course.
And then I was so excited because I love when a show does a silent episode. It's one of the best episodes of Buffy ever. And the fun thing for me about this episode is like they are mostly silent. Mm-hmm. And at first I was annoyed because there are a couple of scenes where they sneak back outside of the bounds so they can whisper to each other.
Right.
And at first I was like, oh, that's annoying. If you're going to do a show like this, commit to the conceit and be silent the whole time. But I ended up really liking it because the show it's just doing what it wants to do.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they do some really fun stuff with captioning, and when they're like, they narrate internal monologues with like little like pictures and stuff at some point.
Yeah. Well, the thing I liked about that episode is also the juxtaposition between the seriousness of the monks and their need for quiet, and Kristen's absolute lack of care.
So silly. That's the other thing. We have a main character who's a woman who's good at her job and competent, but she's also kind of an idiot.
She's so silly sometimes.
And is so silly sometimes.
She's also frolicking in like what is it, like a whiskey or
in a whiskey? It's a whiskey barrel, because it's like one of those things. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
Like wine that is aged in whiskey-soaked barrels that monks make.
Right.
And she gets a little girlfriend in this episode.
Yeah.
They definitely... It happens off camera. Oh, I think it was more than a vibe.
Oh, you do?
Because there's a moment where Kristen reaches out and touches that woman's Fenna, because the guys don't know her name, and she says like, "Oh my god, this place is so anti-women." Mm-hmm. She's so pissed. But Kristen like puts her hand on Fenna's face and leans in, and then it cuts to the next scene.
Okay,
and then a little later on, David finds this is another little detail that's so fun and so unnecessary. They're writing to each other on tablets, but the tablets, it's not like whiteboards. They're those old-fashioned
yep.
I don't even know what you call them, because I don't think they make them anymore, but they're like they have like an overlay of plastic and a black base, and then you draw on them with like a stylus, and then you lift it up to clear it.
Yep.
But they're character ones. They're like branded, but they're a million years old. So like there's a Robin Hood one, and
that was a really fun detail.
It's such a fun little detail. That's what I mean, where the show is so stupid, but it also does like, what a fun, specific choice to do that. But David finds it, and Kristen has written "I want you" on it. He thinks it's for him.
Yeah.
But then later he's giving her eyes, and she can't figure out why he's looking at her like that.
Yes.
If she had written that note for him,
she would have understood.
She would have known.
Yes.
And it happens right after the Dutch girl, Fenna, takes her clothes off to show, this is what a good show, to show Kristen her stigmata wounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, if you're unsure of the tone of the show, like, this is not going to reveal anything crazy, but like looking at the Wikipedia of each episode, random episode in season 2 that you have already seen, during a dental procedure to shave down her canines, which are unusually long, Lexus bites off the dentist's finger, but doesn't remember doing so afterwards. Wait for it. Kristen chooses to keep this a secret from her daughter. Ben receives a visit from a succubus named Abby, who continues to torment him when he sleeps. Like, those two sentences are back to back, and that's the same episode.
There's so much going on. I keep remembering stuff where I'm like, oh my God, that is also happening in the show.
Yeah.
Because I won't say what the big thing is religion, I guess. Like, but the thing, Jodie, I'll bleep it, with the
yeah.
And then you find out that, and I'll bleep this, and that means that's so fun.
Yes.
That's so fun. And I was genuinely surprised by that.
Yeah. We also have like an Angel of Death nurse. Like, yeah.
There's the show has everything. I genuinely can't believe how much I like this show. Because I watched those first couple episodes last week and I was like, oh, it's candy. It's pretty stupid. But if you're fine with that, like, you might like it. I'll probably keep watching. But I just genuinely have a lot of love for this show now.
Yeah.
Like, I stand by what I said to you, which was if I were writing an official review for this, the title would be Evil is So Stupid, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's true. Again, I'm like looking at the Wikipedia for these different episodes, and it's just the juxtaposition of some of these things.
Unapologetically,
yeah.
So serious and so stupid at the same time. It's so fun.
Yes, exactly.
I could see some people having a hard time with that tone. That's the one thing I will say is if you can't settle into that and you don't want your, like, you don't want to love Leland Townsend, who asks David Acosta in the first episode, shouldn't you be raping boys somewhere because he's training to be a priest? Like, if you can't handle that in your kind, like, comedy, sort of. I don't even know what the genre is. Like,
it's like, because it's like really blunt satire or like, you know, commentary on really dark things.
You also just have to be fine with the fact that, like, technology is they are playing fast and loose with how stuff works.
Oh yeah.
My Kitsy, I'm gonna stop saying Kitsy, my housemate, listeners, at this point. Kitsy has worked in like IT forever and knows way more about all of that than I do, and they're fine with it, but will often be like, not how that works. Nope, couldn't do that. Nope, that's not it. That's not what that means. And you just kind of have to, like, be fine with that.
And as the show goes on, like, Ben goes from, like, kind of a smart guy that just knows some stuff to, like, a definite genius.
Okay, I just found out, now I'm just going to bleep stuff because it's fun. I just found out that he's, like, he was into, like, gene editing and is, like, genuinely a genius.
He's a legitimate, like, Mensa, like, physicist, crazy, knows everything about the universe guy. Like, he
is, like, putting distance because he did something. I don't know exactly what the gene editing thing is new for me.
But he, like, understands quantum physics at, like, a deep level. And, like, in the beginning, he's, like, a guy that, like, understands, like, a security system.
And you just kind of have to roll with that.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm fine with it. I don't care. It's so funny to be so nitpicky about some shows, but it's because the show's knows
not
what
taking
it's doing.
It seriously.
It's not pretending to be anything else. Now, I think we've talked about Evil almost as long as we've talked about From. So, you have anything else you want to say about it before we?
Just that I watched the rest of it. I watched all of season 4 in like 2 days.
Please tell me nothing except answer this question.
Okay.
Will I be bummed that I watched 4 seasons of this show?
No.
Great.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's no, I mean, I think the reason you're asking that question is that you realize there's no perfect way to wrap up something like this.
Right.
I think they do the best that they could have. Like, great. They're not going to come to some massive decision or conclusion about what, like, the meaning of the universe is, right? They're not trying to do that.
I'm not going to look at you while I say this. I hope they kill Kristen's mom. She makes no sense. There's something going on. I don't know what it is totally yet, but the way...
You definitely hate her more than I did.
I just need her to get out of the way. I feel about her the way Leland feels about her at this point.
Which is funny because Leland really liked her at first.
Yeah.
I appreciate her as a thorn in Leland's side because he needs somebody to push back.
I agree with that. But I need her to stay there. When I liked her best was when she knew Leland was she got what Leland was to a degree, and also Kristen wasn't talking to her.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything. I will be anxiously awaiting the random texts at 9:00 at night about what episode you are on and what is happening in that episode.
What a fun show.
It's an enjoyable ride, yeah.
That I never in a million years would have checked out if it weren't for this podcast.
Yeah. Well, and one of our listeners, who's actually just also a friend, texted me to tell me that she had watched this show, I think about 4 times. And I kind of get it. Like it's a rewatchable thing.
It's the kind of show like X-Files where like it will now be a show where I'll pull up a random episode and just have it on in the background while I fill out my timesheet. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, totally. Because to me, like a lot of this has run together. Like when you're texting me about episodes, I'm like, oh God, when was that? Because like I watched it all so quickly that like I don't quite remember, because they're kind of standalone, but also within a context. It's a good time. It really is. It's, again, like I said when we first started talking about it, I did not expect to get past an episode or 2 of a sort of corny Buffy meets House meets X-Files. Like, of those 3 shows, the only one I was really into was House, and it is the most like tied to reality one out of all of them. But I just had a great time. So
fun.
Yeah. And I got to be right about something, which is always good for me.
That's the bigger issue for you, or the bigger reward for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah. So next week, you mentioned it briefly. Silo season 2 is wrapping up the end of this week with the last episode. And we're going to kind of, since we talked about the pilot, we're going to kind of go back and talk through our feelings on season 2.
Yeah. And we cut out, the reason we're deciding to do this is we did a little kind of like visit. We checked in on it a couple of weeks ago and ended up talking for like half an hour about it. And so it turns out we have more feelings about the show than I think either of us realized.
Right.
Which, Jodie, my feelings have changed.
Oh.
In the last episode that we watched, I will say. Okay. A little bit.
Okay. So. I am not sure if my feelings have changed. I'm kind of still waiting. I'm still holding out my final opinion.
Yeah, what I should say is my feeling about the last episode is different from, it hasn't changed my view of the whole season so far yet, though I am feeling more hopeful.
Good. Okay, good. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about what's happened up until now, but I'm waiting to put them into context with the final episode, because I do think the last episode, which we're not gonna, if you haven't watched it yet, we won't spoil anything, but like it was episode 9. There was more forward movement in that
than
episode.
We've had all fucking season.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Exactly. So yeah, just a little hint of how we're feeling. But yeah, so we're going to talk through Silo. We are rapidly approaching. We got about a month out before Yellowjackets is back.
I know. And we have Severance in between.
I know. Lots of good stuff coming.
What a good time.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, so that'll be next week. So just you briefly threw it out there, but where can they find us?
Oh, we're at WatchersPodNJ on Instagram, WatchersPodNJ@gmail. I'm at AQAndreaQ on Instagram.
And I am Jodie_Mim on Instagram, JODIE_MIM. And we will see you next week.
In the deep down.
The down deep, Andrea.
Oh, in the down deep.
We'll be underground. We'll be down there.